Hi, I'm Pam, and I would like to welcome you to the Live Authentically show. My team and I help other people step into their authentic reality via a number of different modalities. This show is one of them. We also have a Facebook group of like minded people committed to spiritual growth and transformation, and we would love to have you join us. We're at liveauthentically.today/FB. I'm also super pumped that last year I launched my debut book. It's called SOAR, SOAR, and it's a spiritual experiential account of a transformative event in my life and shows how I partnered with the universe and incorporated universal truths to create my new reality. And I believe that anybody in any aspect of their life can get to a place of soaring. So I am thrilled that on my show with me today, I have Rocky Lalvani. Hey, Rocky.
Hey, Pam, thank you so much for having me here today.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited about our conversation today. Profit is Rocky's middle name for those of you who don't know. He owns a business called Profit Comes First, and he has a really interesting approach. I'm super excited to dive into this. But before we do that, I would like to ask you the same question that I ask all of my guests. And that question is, how do you live authentically every day?
So I think the biggest problem that I see with people is that they haven't defined what their authenticity is. Like if you're saying to me, how do you live authentically every day? Well, the first thing I have to do is to define who am I? What do I want from life?
Mm-hmm.
And then live in alignment with that. Now, no one's going to be perfect, right? You say, this is where I'd like to live. Well, we're here today. Okay, what step can I take towards that? And so I have a written life plan and I review it annually. And it basically says, we start with my eulogy. This is what I want the world to say about me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I work backwards from there for every single part of my life. And I define what that looks like. So, how do I relate to my family? How do I relate to work? How do I relate to my health? How do I relate to my mindsets? How do I relate to the universe spiritually? And for each area, I've defined what I want. And because I know what I want, it becomes so easy to live authentically because you're like, hey, this is what I said. And am I doing that or am I not doing that?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really to me what it comes down to. What I have found, because I've asked this question of numerous people, even people who are super successful, like, do you have your written life plan?
Mm-hmm.
And invariably, I think it's about 1% to 3% of people say, yes, I have it. And I review it or I look at it. And I think this is why most people are in the drift. Like
Mm-hmm.
they're running along with life and they're like, why don't I have what I want? Well, because you didn't define it and you
Mm-hmm.
didn't test it and you didn't refine it.
I think that's brilliant. Thank you for sharing that. So, what are some of the first steps someone could take? Can you kind of, I know you just kind of outlined the framework, but I start with the question, and this concept of authenticity, it's so broad and it's so vague and it's not tangible. And like you said, it's like, how do we even get there? How do we define it? How do we bring some clarity around it? So, what is something small that our viewers and listeners could do this weekend or this week to really hone in and start down that path of living an authentic life?
So I'll give you two things because I think it depends on where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with Napoleon Hill?
Mm-hmm. Yep,
Have you ever heard of his book, Outwitting the Devil?
I have not.
So most people haven't. The book was written in the 1930s. His family refused to allow him to actually publish it. So
Oh,
it didn't get published until probably within the last less than 10 years ago.
okay.
And Outwitting the Devil is essentially it's a story and it's kind of a conversation with how do you beat the devil.
Okay.
And the way you beat the devil is by being intentional in your life, right? When you're intentional, the devil loses. When you're in the drift, the devil wins.
Mm-hmm.
And throughout the book, And it's funny because, this was written in the 30s, 1930s. And you
Okay.
start reading what they talk about, how maybe the church puts you in the drift, how
Mm-hmm.
your parents put you in the drift, how
Mm-hmm.
school puts you in the drift. And so if you need to have a little bit of enlightenment, of kind of a wake up, I suggest you look at that book. Now, if you already know this, then the second book I have for you is a book called Living Forward: How to Get Out of the Drift and Create a Proven Plan. It's by Michael Hyatt. And it's one of my top recommended books. The reason I like it is because they have helped people create their life plans.
Okay.
And the book is an easy read, and it shows you step by step. And if you go to their website, they'll even give you the templates. And
Mm-hmm.
that's how I created my life plan. I read that book, and it takes
Mm-hmm.
time, but you can read the book easily in a weekend and start thinking about every area of your life and just start taking notes. What do I want my life to be? And as part of that, and this is where I really struggled, it's what don't I want? Because
Mm-hmm.
defining what you don't want starts to close the box on what you do want. And once you have intentionality and you have a target, it becomes so easy to hit the target. But when you don't have a target, you get so distracted, and you're running around like on a hamster wheel, and you wonder why you don't get anywhere.
Right, right. And I love how you talked about being intentional, because that's really this process to authenticity, this journey is about going from the unconscious, which is I would expect. I don't know the formal definition of, the word drift that you use, but I would imagine that's that space where we're just kind of on autopilot, going through the motions, allowing life to run us rather than dealing with it from a conscious perspective and really, being intentional about what we do. But that's really when the power lies. It's like we don't have to allow ourselves to get sucked into drama, or we don't have to allow ourselves to continue living with a ridiculous amount of noise in our life. Like we can take steps towards simplifying and towards making disconnections and towards putting our energy and attention towards things that move us forward.
And that is so true. And that is basically the drift is going through life kind of like on the lottery path, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if this happens, I'll follow it. If this doesn't happen, there's no intentionality to it. It's just
Mm-hmm.
whatever happens. And I think most people do that. They want somebody else to tell them what to do instead of deciding what they want.
Yeah. And I think that what I've learned, at least one of the things I've learned on my journey, is that we have way more power than we're conditioned to believe, way more power within us than we're led to believe and that we realize. And when we finally realize that, our thoughts have an energy and what we put out into the world comes back to us, et cetera, that's when we start to make different decisions.
So true. I tell people life is simple,
Mm-hmm.
but for whatever reason, doing simple is hard. We all want complicated solutions to life. We want these, big complex plans, but life is not complex. Life is simple.
Right.
And if you just do the simple universal truths,
Mm-hmm.
then it all works out.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's actually one of the quotes that I came up with that I really do live by and teach is that, life, we allow life to become complicated, but it is simple, like you said. And, it's like if we anchor on why we're here to love, to grow, to serve, and to have fun along the way. I mean, if we can run everything that we do through those filters and figure out which one or maybe a couple of those categories it fits into, then it really is easier to make decisions and we can live just with more peace and ease and grace. And, and I got caught up in a lot of that too, just the busyness of life and like working crazy hours and thinking, well, this is just the way it is. Then hopefully when I'm 65, I'll be able to retire and enjoy a couple of good years of good health before I hit the life expectancy in the next decade. I'm like, that model does not work for me. I'm sorry. So I'd love to dive next into what you do professionally, because I love your idea. I love how you upended this whole formula of profits, right? This whole formula of sales minus expenses, and then profits is just what's left over. I love how, again, you've taken kind of that unconscious path and upended that and have made it more of a conscious and intentional exercise. So we'd love for you to just kind of frame up, what you do, and then we can dive into it a little bit deeper.
So it took me a long time to figure this out because of the way I grew up. I didn't realize how different it was than what most people grow up with.
Okay.
And we all have different mindsets, right? One of those mindsets are money mindsets. We all have a money story. And like all mindsets, these are created sometime when you're a kid, sometime between 5 and 13, you created a money mindset that kind of got planted and you just continue following it. So one of those might be rich people are evil. Money doesn't grow on trees. We'll never be rich. Money is the root of evil, right? And that's not even true because people think that that's what's in the Bible, but the Bible actually says the love of money is the root of all evil, not the money itself. So I think a big part is understanding your money mindsets. Unfortunately, we are not taught money. And I have a Bachelor of Science in Economics. I have an MBA. Even corporately, they don't teach you how to be profitable, how to make money, how to keep money, and how to allow it to grow. There's natural laws that apply to money, just like there's natural laws to everything. And one of those is the power of compounding. So getting back to your question. So everyone is told by accountants, right? Sales minus expenses equals profit. The problem with that equation is profit is a leftover. It's an afterthought. It's something that most people don't learn about or don't even know until tax time. Most business owners are busy in their business. They're running their business. They're not worried about the finances because they're not accountants and they don't want to be. They want to focus on the parts of the business that they love. The problem with that equation, though, is you're not being intentional. When you created your business plan, when you created your business, you said, we're going to be profitable, right? Nobody went into business to be unprofitable and lose money. But we don't intentionally take it. So and this equation comes from Mike Michalowicz. He wrote the book Profit First. The new equation is sales minus profit equals expenses. And so we take our profit first and we constrain our expenses. Now, most people don't want to tell you to do that. They all tell you have to spend money to make money, which isn't always true. And what we try to tell people is you need to be more resourceful. You don't need more resources. When you take the time to breathe and think about your money and do it intentionally and do a little bit of math behind it, it becomes very easy to figure out how to be profitable, how to keep your profit, and how to grow wealth over time. But unfortunately, we aren't taught this. It's not something that shows up in school. And societally, especially in Western culture, you're taught that talking about money is taboo.
Right.
And so people don't do it.
Right. I'm sure every situation is different, but do you see a kind of a common theme when you start to work with companies and when you start to really dive into this? Is there a particular area where, kind of like low hanging fruit in terms of expenses when they've been running with this kind of old paradigm formula, if you will, and just kind of paying expenses, thinking that, well, this is just part and parcel of running a business? Is there any area where you see people kind of tending to gravitate and kind of like this low hanging fruit, like this is an immediate area where we can cut back?
Usually when I look at a company, there's two things that pop out at me. The first is pricing. Have they priced their products appropriately to cover the costs of what it costs to deliver that product? And you'd be surprised. A lot of times people underprice. New entrepreneurs especially are afraid to charge more. They're like, will people pay that? Am I worth that? Right? It comes back to this is all emotional. It's not math. It's emotions.
Yeah.
And so for a lot of people, I think their pricing is wrong. They don't actually take the time to figure out the inputs and the labor that goes into something and all the costs that are there. So that's usually one area that we focus on. The second one is expenses. And what happens is, as you grow your business, well, I need this. Well, I need that. Well, I need this. And I need that. And when you start to actually look at the line items, you're like, oh, I stopped using that a year ago. I'm still paying for it. Oh, we have 3 different softwares and they all do the same thing. Oh, I have an employee that unfortunately doesn't provide much value and creates fires every day so that they can put them out and make themselves look good. And so all of these little things, when you start to examine them, kind of come together. I was talking to somebody the other day and she said, we had 4 people answering the phones. And she said the problem with 4 people answering the phones was everyone was expecting someone else to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when they cut from 4 people to 2 people and they separated the 2 people, they got the same level of productivity as they were getting with 4, because human nature got in the way. And when people had clarity, hey, it's my job to answer the phone. There's nobody else who's going to do it. This is for me. They just started working better and there was no more drama. And so when you remove the drama and you remove the emotions, then that's kind of what comes together. So those are the 2 bigger drivers is that. And it's looking at every part of your business and asking yourself, why are we doing this? Too often people say, well, this is the way we always did it. Well, let's face it. We just went through COVID. The way we always did it no longer works.
Right.
So if you're not challenging everything, if you're not constantly looking at it and finding better ways and improving, somebody else is. And so you've got to constantly be doing that. I think that's a big part of it is challenge everything. Why do we do things this way? Does it make sense? And kind of going forward. Too often we just do things because that's what we were told to do.
Yeah. Again, that conscious thinking, right? The asking the questions, the constantly challenging. I love it. On the pricing part, you probably noticed that I was like smiling or smirking a little bit when you were talking about that, because that's because it resonated with me, because I totally went through that when I was building my business. When I put together my early packages, I went through all of that. Well, is it too high? And I'm not sure. I don't want to charge too much. And and then it was, and then COVID hit, and I'm like, oh, people are really strapped for money, and they aren't going to be spending. So I was like finding reasons to not, step into my value. And that was my old money program running that's still hanging around from when I was a kid. I grew up in an old school Italian family. My dad was the youngest of 14 kids. We were abundant in like love and nurturing and all of that, but not a lot of financial resources. So I had all of like that whole script running through my childhood. So, that like save for a rainy day, the words like, sacrifice, things like that. Like there wasn't a lot of extra money. We always had our needs met, but wants were, like that was kind of a luxury to have those met. So part of my journey has been undoing all of that and learning how to step into my value. And I know a lot of entrepreneurs run into that. So I'd love to hear you talk about more of the emotional piece of it too, because that is such a big part of it, stepping into your value. And the reality is the world responds to the way we feel about ourselves, right? How we value ourselves is how the world reacts, right? So if we aren't feeling high value, the people around us are going to pick that up and not treat us as high value, so love to hear any words of wisdom you have to say around like the emotional piece of it, in terms of there are people out there struggling with stepping into their value and finding their worth. What do you have to say around that?
And I think for most people, it's kind of like a thermostat, right? You're comfortable at whatever temperature you're at. And so most people struggle to go from where they are to where they need to be. So I tell them to take baby steps. Don't go too crazy, but little by little, you can start increasing your pricing. The other thing that happens is, and you'll always hear stories about this. I was just on a call the other day and he was telling me, he goes, I made this offer to somebody, and by the look on his face, I realized I had blown it. And basically what happened is the person said to him, if that's all you're charging, you really don't have much value for me. You're telling me that you really don't have value. And
Mm,
so I don't want to do business with you because you charge too little.
okay.
And I've heard that multiple times. So even Sean Akers said it. So Sean Akers is a speaker. He wrote, I think it's The Big Potential and The Happiness Advantage, right? So he said when he was on stage, he did a great job. And a corporate client came to him and he gave them the price. And they said to him, thank you, but no. We don't want a $3,000 speaker. We expect a $10,000 speaker.
Okay.
And so he raised his prices and then he got the deals.
Okay.
And the other thing is, usually when you have people who are looking for cheap, they're going to grind you down because they're in that mindset. And you get stuck in that grinding mindset. People who are abundant expect to pay more. There are people who want to pay more, who take pride and privilege in doing that. And so you've got to learn every market's different. And if you're a commodity, you don't have pricing power because you are a commodity. So how do you not be a commodity? How do you bring value and how do you show that difference? And then do you project that out into the world? And it is like, for a lot of, it's probably more on the coaching side. And that is to slowly raise your prices over time.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, I was just talking with somebody who's in the course creation business, and he looked at the price of my course. He goes, no, you got to double that. And I already had doubled it, right?
Okay.
So now it's the second double. And I had somebody else tell me the same. I can't tell you how often these conversations happen where if you don't charge an appropriate price, people don't, they think you have no value.
Okay.
It's a weird human behavior.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see. I've experienced that before. And like, I know you were talking about the people who, who are like negotiating from the get-go. Like those are the ones who will grind you down, right? I remember I was about ready to sell like my first package way back when. This was when I was selling like mini packages, like really low priced, just to get some momentum around that. And they asked me for like $10 off from the beginning. And I was thinking, oh, no problem. Like $10, of course, coming at this from a generous, like benevolent mindset, like, oh, sure, I'm happy to make that accommodation. My business manager was like, no way, do not budge, you stand in your value. There are people in this world who will meet you where you are. Don't lower yourself. Don't lower your standards. Stay where you are, stay firmly affixed where you are. And there are people, then you'll become a vibrational match. You'll be linked up with other people who will appreciate that value.
And that's true. And so this is a perfect analogy for this, right? If you're on the bottom rung of the ladder, don't try and jump to the top rung of the ladder because most likely you will miss and fall and hurt yourself. Just take one step at a time.
Yeah.
And then keep climbing the ladder little by little. And as you build your value, as the world starts to appreciate what you have to do, little by little, you increase your prices. It does take time. And then you get comfortable there. And then you do it again. And then you get comfortable there. And you continue to keep doing that.
Yeah.
And there are going to be people who say no. Get comfortable with no. It's okay. That wasn't for you.
Yeah. Love that. I know. So you had talked about in terms of value, right? There's commodities, and sometimes there are situations where we don't have a lot of latitude or flexibility to adjust our prices. But, as like, there's always ways to bring value. There's always ways to differentiate ourselves. So regardless of the business, I know every situation is different, but what are some core values or what are some ways that we can differentiate ourselves in general, in terms of business or even more broadly in life?
So, in terms of business, there are ways to differentiate yourself. Number one, go into a niche. I do X, but I don't do it for everybody. I only do it for this small group of people.
Mm-hmm.
And that small group of people, because you know them so well and how they run their business, will want that. It could be speed of delivery,
Mm-hmm.
right? We can go to the post office or we can go to FedEx.
Mm-hmm.
FedEx charges a lot more because they offer speed. It could be customization. It could be the quality of the materials, right? I can go to McDonald's and get a hamburger. I can go somewhere else and get a hamburger, and they charge 10 times what McDonald's charges. And yet they sell hamburgers. Why? It's a better quality product. And so there are all these different types of levers. You've got to figure out, what does the world want?
Mm-hmm.
Number one, and they're willing to pay for.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of this two-stroke thing of, there's a lot of people who want stuff, but they're not willing to pay for it. And so you got to find that kind of perfect match. And then taking that back to life, what do you have? Everyone's got unique skills, right? There's something you do better than 10,000 other people. What are your unique skills that you love doing and you're good at? When you can figure out your unique skills that you love doing and are good at, and match them with what the market wants and needs and is willing to pay for, that intersection is phenomenal. That is where the abundance and the money just starts flowing.
Love that. I can tell how passionate you are just by hearing you talk about this. There's just so much passion in your voice. So I'd like to hear more specifically, what aspect of your life, whether it's business or personal or kind of the blend between the two, lights you up the most? When do you have those moments of like, oh yeah, I am like sitting squarely in the middle, like smack dab in the middle of my life purpose. This is why I'm here.
So I will tell you a story about this, because I was misaligned for most of my life.
Okay.
All right. When I was a kid, and I'm in my 50s now, PCs were just coming out. And one of the first programs that came out early on when I was a teenager was called VisiCalc.
Okay.
And VisiCalc is the precursor that went through multiple iterations. Today, we all know it as Excel, right? Electronic spreadsheets.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in high school, I was teaching accountants how to go from paper ledgers to spreadsheets. When I look at spreadsheets, they tell me stories, right? So I was on the cutting edge of this technology. Numbers tell me stories. It's my gift. Spreadsheets and me, we just go together. It's my gift. And even when I was in college, I was working for a bank, and they were like, hey, put this stuff in spreadsheets for us and track it for us so we have our data. And I did that. And then when I got out of college, I was like, I should build spreadsheets for people.
Mm-hmm.
But I had no idea how to start a business. Back then, there was no internet. There was no way, like, how do I even tell people that I do these spreadsheets? How do I even convey the value that I have?
Mm-hmm.
And so I just kind of went off and, I found a job and did well. And I always say that good is kind of the enemy of great, because when you're comfortable, you don't strive. And so I was very comfortable and didn't really look at spreadsheets for a while, although like my whole life was run on spreadsheets in the background. Like that's just the way I did things. And then I realized how big a business spreadsheets were. People are spending like billions of dollars for data.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came back around. I'm like, well, okay, how can I help people? And then the big aha came for me when I read Mike's book was, what do you mean business owners aren't looking at their financials? What do you, and then it was like, oh, they're not accountants. They're doing what they love in their business and they're ignoring the numbers. And you know what happens when you ignore the numbers?
Mm-hmm.
You run into problems. So it's like, I understand spreadsheets. I understand numbers. I can help this group of people. And this group of people is willing to pay, because if I can give them insights into their business that they can take actionable steps on, they will pay a lot of money because they're going to make 10 or 100x the value that I'm delivering to them. And so I finally figured out my puzzle pieces. And that was a long, slow journey. So, but that's how it kind of came together for me.
And what is one thing you learned about yourself during that journey?
So, but, I think it was more that I settled. So we talk about being in the drift. That whole time I was in the drift. I was just taking whatever life gave me. I did have certain parameters that I did follow. So there were parts of my life that weren't in the drift. I understood money. I understood building wealth. And so I'm a rarity. As a W-2 employee, I became a multimillionaire because I understood the principles of compounding. I understood how to build systems and processes to build wealth in the background that ran automatically. The second thing I did was I realized that climbing the corporate ladder was not going to provide the value that I realized that was a false story. Like I would look around and go, you want to give me a promotion? That's wonderful. You want me to work twice as hard, but for 20% more money, with the promise that maybe if I get through the next 5 promotions, then I'll get the big payday. But in order to do that, it's like you were taught, like so much overtime, so much, moving your family, the cost of it all. I was like, I don't want to pay that price.
Yeah.
And so I said no to it all. And I was okay just staying in the bottom because I knew up front that my job was never going to give me fulfillment in life. And I said, I'm going to use this job so that I have the time and the money to find fulfillment elsewhere. So I've always been disconnected from my title. Like I know a lot of people are very connected. They wear their title is their entity. And I've never done that. My title was I'm a dad. My title is I'm a husband. My title is I'm going to live life on my freedom. My title's not my job. And so separating those two. And I think for a lot of people, that is a big struggle, especially for doctors, attorneys, for people like that. They get stuck in that. And you are not that title.
Yeah. Yeah. That's just so profound and such a deep awareness. The sooner we become aware of that, then it helps us make different decisions that are in alignment and help lead us towards authenticity. One of the things I do is, like on my journey, I identified, what is it that I truly want in life? And then what are my core values? So I run all my decisions, small and large decisions through that. So like a couple of my core values that I live by are simplicity. I like my life to be simple. I don't like it complicated. I don't like it noisy. I don't like it pressuresome. So I'm constantly making simplifications. And also freedom. I like to feel free. I don't like to feel encumbered, et cetera. So when we really anchor on what we want, what we truly want, and gain clarity around that, then that's what helps guide us to that authentic place.
And I think I have those same core values too, right?
Yeah.
Keeping it simple, learning. I mean, we did chase, the American dream for a while, but then we stopped and we said, you know what? While I could have a bigger house, I don't need it.
Yeah.
While I could have a fancier car, I don't need it. Like, it's not going to make me any happier. If anything, it's going to create more obligations. Yeah. And so we learn to kind of step off the hamster wheel and take back control of time, because that is at the end of the day, everyone chases money. Who chases time? And that is the one commodity you can't buy.
Right.
I can't say, oh, here's $1 billion. Give me an extra 3 years of life. Right.
Right.
And Steve Jobs found that out. Doesn't matter how much money he had.
Right.
Life is short. And until you understand that and start valuing it, it's a shame.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah, one of the articles I just wrote this week was, are you ready to start really living? And, I said, face your own mortality. When you finally realize, like that day that it hits you, that you have a finite number of days on this earth, you have a limited amount of time. I think so many, it's so, life is hard sometimes because, we think that we have all the time in the world. We think, well, I'll just do it later. I'll do it when I retire. I'll do it when the kids get older. And when we finally realize that we don't have the guarantee of time, then we start to make different decisions. And then that's when we really tap into the depth and the authenticity and the meaning and the substance and the purpose. And even everyday life becomes exciting. We realize we no longer have to wait for the parties or the celebrations or the events or the holidays to really enjoy ourselves. We can find enjoyment from going on a walk or baking a cake or whatever. Like anything we do, we can intentionally optimize and make every single day a celebration.
In life is a journey. And if you're not enjoying the journey, if you're saying, I'll be happy when, you're in trouble because when may never come. And by the time it does, unfortunately, in this country, most people aren't in the shape to enjoy it. And I know you're from Italy. That was the one thing that was amazing. When I went to Italy, we were in the Amalfi Coast. And
Mm-hmm.
so the Amalfi Coast is very steep, right? And it's scary. Going to Italy scares me. Those drop edges off the road and the way they drive. But what you would see are these 70, 80, 90-year-old people walking up steps and cobblestones, where in America, these people would be in a nursing home.
Yeah.
Like they are alive. They're like, you have to get out and move and live. And I think it has to do with what they eat and the fact that every day they essentially work out because they're going up and down and they're living life. It's not
Right.
so easy.
Right.
And because of that, they live a long life, they live a healthy life, and very enlightening.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we are just about wrapped up. Unfortunately, I could sit here and chat with you all day. Such a rich discussion. But I want to give you just kind of a couple of minutes here to just open up the floor and give you carte blanche to talk about whatever you'd like to in these last couple of minutes. So any final words of wisdom, would love to have you share your contact information, etc.
So yeah, let's start because I come from a money standpoint. What I would say to people is the power of compounding is true. And it always works, but you have to keep going. And so what I tell people is if you haven't started saving yet, start. And just start with 1% of your income or 1% of sales in your company and put it into a separate account and don't touch it. And over time, just slowly baby step it up. So maybe after 3 or 6 months, take your 1% and make it 2%. And again, on a regular routine, just ever so slightly edge up that number. And over 5, 6, 7 years, you can get to a 10, 20, 30% savings rate because that's money that you ignore now that can just automatically start building wealth for you. If you haven't learned the power of compounding, go learn the power of compounding because a single penny doubling, right, for 31 times, one penny doubled 31 times turns into about 10 million plus dollars. So even that tiny little one penny over time can turn into enormous wealth. So that's my suggestion, whether your personal savings, business savings, just take that action and take the time. And the problem with delaying is when you delay, it's not that first penny you're losing, it's the last double. So in order to get to $10 million, which is the last double, one delay puts you at $5 million. 2 delays puts you at $2.5 million. 3 delays puts you at about $1.25 million, which means if you just do that little bit of delay, you've literally given up over $8 million by not taking that first step. So do that. Compounding works in every area of life. It's not just money. It's your weight. It's your debt. It's your learning. It's your skills across the board. So that is what I would suggest. Beyond that, if you enjoy this show, would you do Pamela a favor? Would you leave a rating and a review for her? It makes a difference. It allows others to find her and to be enlightened. And it's a great way to say thank you to her for the content and what she delivers to you without even charging you. So it's a way to be abundant back. So that's something nice that you can do for her. If you'd like to find me and you are a business owner The website is profitcomesfirst.com. And from there, you can find me. You can find the podcast, Profit Answer Man. I teach all about business finance. If you're on the other side and you really want to learn more about, hey, I've figured out my money, how do I live the abundant life? That can all be found at richersoul.com. There's a podcast there, which is just how do you live abundantly? What are the practical steps you can take every day to be able to do that? Those are probably the two best places to find me.
Super powerful. Thank you so much. I so appreciate the time you spent here with me today. And thank you so much for being here and all the wisdom that you shared.
Thank you so much for having me and allowing me to do that, and for the great work that you do to make the universe a better place.
Thank you so much. That's so touching. And to all of our viewers and listeners, I appreciate you. As you know by now, I believe that time is a choice, and I'm grateful that you've carved time out of your day to be here with me and Rocky and listen to all of the wisdom that he's had to share. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day. Bye.